Well, thank you to Memo for the invitation, and thank you, Hugh, for a very intriguing presentation. So, was it a purge, and if so, of what? Normally, you associate purges with the removal of political rivals. The last one standing in Saudi was Miteb, the late king's son. Miteb, as head of the National Guard, was, of course, among those arrested in the sweep of November 4th, but it happened without a peep from the National Guard. So what that tells me is that politically, this was not a big deal. Mohammed bin Salman has pretty much acquired virtually every asset politically. So I think that really the power grab, if you will, is a purge of commercial rivals. And I want to focus on three in particular who also happen to control media empires. And I think this has deep implications for the freedom of speech and the freedom of association, and of course for human rights. Vision 2030, Mohammed bin Salman's big idea, the grand project, women, a key component, a key part of the driving force, an empowered private sector, an end to corrupt practices, more transparency, the end of oil dependency by 2020, the creation of 1 million new jobs in the private sector by 2020. All of these huge goals, as well as the creation of an entertainment sector, a tourism sector, and of course, using the media to power this vision forward. Now, we've been told that the line of the Saudi government is that this is an anti-corruption drive. And there is no doubt there's a lot of corrupt practice in the 200-plus princes and businessmen who have been arrested. But you have to ask yourself, why these guys? Why just these guys? After all, it's estimated there's something like, 5,000 is the figure of princes. I've also heard figures of up to 15,000. Anyway, a huge number of ruling family members who all dip into the oil revenues and enrich themselves. And they're all, to a greater or lesser degree, part of this enormous web of corruption, including Mohammed bin Salman and his father, because, of course, the father was the defense minister, and Mohammed bin Salman was his aide, and acquired, I think it's fair to say, a large amount of money in that position. As you mentioned, he spent $500 million on a boat. Who has $500 million to spend on a boat? And as I said, Miteb was pretty much out of the picture by the time of his arrest. So the big three that I want to focus on are Al-Walid bin Talal, Saleh Kamal, and Walid al-Ibrahim. Now, these three have one thing in common, in addition to the fact that they're all incredibly wealthy, is they all own major media companies. Now, Kingdom Holding, which is bin Talal's company, it includes hotel chains and entertainment and media, which is Rotana. He's worth 16 to 20 billion. Pick your number. He's the big fish, and known not just for his wealth, but also his liberal economic views, and interestingly, his views on empowering women. Saleh Kamal, he heads up Dala Al-Baraka. It's a vast holding company. It has a broad-based investment portfolio with holdings throughout the Middle East, North Africa, the Far East, and Europe. He owns the newspaper, Okaz, which always adhered to the government line, and also founded ART, Arab Radio and Television, in 1993. And ART, I quote, produces over 6,000 live and recorded shows every year, including family-oriented dramas, series, plays, sports programs, music videos, documentaries. The network has the largest Arabic movie library in the Middle East and has been associated with leading film production studios in the Arab world for well over 30 years. Obviously, a very big media player. Walid al-Ibrahim founded Middle East Broadcasting Corporation, NBC, and Al Arabiya newspaper falls into that group. Now, reportedly, Mohammed bin Salman tried to buy NBC, and he was rebuffed. Well, now it looks like he's found another way to acquire, or perhaps acquire a ruling percentage of NBC. But then you wonder, why arrest them? Why not just co-opt them? You've got all that power. And I think the reason is part of his Mohammed bin Salman's MO, his modus operandi, which is big actions with little thought or no thought for the consequences. If you look at what he's done in three areas, we'll begin with the economic. So what did he do? He put a freeze on these huge government contracts. There was $1 trillion worth of contracts because he said they'd been awarded corruptly. It's true, they had been. But what happened to the construction industry? It immediately went into shrinkage. He then proceeded to drastically curtail the take-home pay of public sector workers. Of course, public sector workers are by far the biggest employees, the government, the biggest employees, and those cuts amounted to something like 40%. Suddenly, people had very little disposable income. What happened? The whole economy then contracts. So something that had he thought it through, would have done gradually, step by step. He simply leapt in hard. Now, he has restored the cuts to the public sector workers. There was no cry online, which he responded to. Let's look at the Yemen war. He thought, right, I'll go in a couple of weeks, maybe a month, take out the Houthis. I'll burnish my reputation as a warrior prince, rather like my grandfather, the founder of the kingdom, Ibn Saud. That war, as we know, continues 2.5 years on. Appalling consequences, the worst human catastrophe, right? Humanitarian catastrophe. And what does Mohammed bin Salman do? He stubbornly carries on with that war. And finally, I look at Qatar. Qatar has been pointed at as the source of terror funding. It's not. I mean, you can look at Saudi Arabia, you look at the Emiratis, you can look at the Kuwaitis and say, terror funding? Yeah, you all have questions to answer. This feud benefits nobody other than Iran. Iran, without having to lift a finger, and of course Iran is the great enemy, regional foe of particularly the Saudis, and the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, admittedly not that cooperative, but still functioning, has now been ruptured. So on the diplomatic front, on the economic front, and on the military front, he's failed. So why did he carry out this purge? Was he afraid that these three media tycoons would see the many weaknesses of his grand vision and start to subtly use their media to undermine it? Was that a fear? Or did he see them as simply commercial rivals in areas that he wants to move into? Entertainment, tourism, media. It's probably both those things. And I think he does understand, clearly, he's media savvy, the importance of media in getting his message out. Now, Mohammed bin Salman's record on human rights is abysmal. He talks about economic modernization and a moderate Islam. It plays very well in the West. An Islam that is free from extremist views. But there are clerics who are still in place who hold to those views. The columnist, Jamal Khashoggi, who has fled Saudi Arabia, in a France 24 interview I saw a couple of days ago, argued that the senior council ulama are, in his words, infected with radicals. Radicals, he said, work in the public sector. Khashoggi argues that if the tap is turned off, if the government simply stops paying the radicals, extremism will wither. Now, I'm not sure if that's the case. But the immediate question is, will MBS move against these extremists in a big way? He's not in a position to do so. I think he is indicating his weakness. And I don't think he will. I don't think he'll move against them. He does understand that that such a move would be terribly destabilizing. And of course, there remain many people in Saudi Arabia who are confused and uncertain and are simply afraid to speak out. And they have good cause. So what is his game? He's arrested both militants and human rights and liberal activists. But I think his game really is he looks at China and Xi Jinping and says, right, that's the way to go. A top-down command capitalist economy with me in total charge and with few, if any, human rights attached. He wants to alter the social constructs in Saudi society with projects like the 500 billion Neom city. Now, the Saudis have already had economic cities that have effectively crashed and burned. King Abdullah economic city is one example. It's about 10% of capacity. Yet he's going to spend 500 billion on another one. He's doled out $1 billion to Richard Branson for Branson's Space Odysseys. He's given women the right to drive. He's allowing men and women into sports stadia and encouraged mixed arts and cultural events, all in a bid to modernize and change the society. But because he's such a hasty young man, he wants to achieve his cultural and economic revolution almost overnight. And so to do that, he crushes dissent. So where are the voices that could question the speed with which he is carrying out change in the country? Where are the voices to suggest that such a broad campaign needs to consult with a broad base in order to sustain it? That meaningful engagement in his Vision 2030 requires the right to criticize, to question, to challenge. And where are those voices? Well, those voices are silenced. Some of them are in jail. Some of them, like Jamal Khashoggi, have fled abroad. But most have chosen the sensible and safe option of silence. My read is that many young Saudis remain largely supportive that Mohammed bin Salman has a window in which to move forward on key areas like affordable housing, meaningful jobs. But the continued crackdown on his critics and the threat that hangs over anyone who might be perceived to be a challenge to him, coupled with a failure to deliver the nuts and bolts such as affordable housing and meaningful jobs, means that that support is fluid. Failure to deliver, and it could and will slip away very quickly. If he wants to achieve this modern state, he needs to begin the process of enabling constructive dissent. But I do not see that happening. And the events of 4th of November confirm my view that he's moving as fast and as far away as possible from consensual government, even of the sort that in the past allowed the royal family to rule. Mohammed bin Salman is headed towards an authoritarian dictatorship of one-man rule with all that entails. A crushing of critics, the emergence of a cult of personality with the potential to achieve a staggering level of corruption. I too have heard the story of Mohammed bin Salman boasting to his inner family that he wants to be the world's first trillionaire. And, he has put himself in position to be just that. So to answer the question, was there a coup on the 4th of November? Yes, there was. It was a coup against commercial rivals dressed up as a campaign against corruption. It was a coup against any hope that Saudi Arabia would move towards the beginnings of democratic governance. It was a coup on behalf of dictatorship, one that bodes ill for freedom of association, freedom of personal expression, and freedom of the media, and not just in Saudi Arabia, but in the wider Gulf as well. Thank you.